The Arizona sun hung low and merciless over the dusty mining town of Copper Creek, painting the weathered buildings in shades of rust and amber. Heat waves shimmered off the hard-packed earth of Main Street, where tumbleweeds rolled past like ghosts of better days. The air tasted of alkali dust and gunpowder, a flavor that had settled into the very soul of this forgotten corner of the territory. Clara Whitfield stood behind the bar of the Silver Dollar Saloon, mechanically wiping down glasses that would never truly be clean. The late afternoon light filtered through grimy windows, casting long shadows across the sawdust-covered floor. She'd been doing this same motion for 3 years now, ever since she'd arrived in Copper Creek with nothing but the clothes on her back and a past she couldn't outrun. The saloon was already filling with miners, their faces caked with red dust from the copper mines that gave the town its name. They came in loud and thirsty, demanding whiskey and entertainment in equal measure. Clara had learned to navigate their crude jokes and wandering hands with a practiced smile that never quite reached her hazel eyes. "Hey there, sweet Clara," hollered Jake Morrison, a burly miner with more muscle than sense. "How about you pour me something special and keep me company for a spell?" Clara poured his whiskey with steady hands, though inside she felt the familiar tightness in her chest. "Just doing my job. Jake, that'll be 2 bits. The banjo player in the corner struck up a melancholy tune, something about lost love and dusty trails. It was the same repertoire every night, songs of heartbreak and longing that seemed to seep into the very walls of the establishment. Clara had memorized every note, every word, until they became the soundtrack to her captivity. She was 23 years old, though the mirror behind the bar showed eyes that had seen too much. Her auburn hair was pinned up in the style expected of saloon girls, revealing a neck that bore faint scars she kept hidden with high collars and careful positioning. The red satin dress she wore was faded and patched, but she carried herself with a dignity that set her apart from the other girls who worked the upstairs rooms. The saloon doors swung open with a creak that cut through the din of conversation. A man entered, bringing with him the scent of sage and distant places. He moved with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to watching his back, dust coating his dark coat and worn leather boots. His hat was pulled low, but Clara caught a glimpse of steel-gray eyes that swept the room with calculating precision. He chose a table in the corner, back to the wall, with clear sight lines to both exits. Clara had seen enough drifters to recognize the signs. This was a man who lived on the edge of the law, who slept with one eye open and his hand near his gun. "Clara, quit your dawdling and get that gentleman his drink," barked Samuel Hutchins, the saloon owner, from his position near the cash box. He was a greasy man who viewed his employees as property, nothing more than assets to increase his profits. Clara approached the stranger's table, noting the way his hand rested casually near the Colt revolver at his hip. Up close, she could see the lines etched by sun and hardship on his face. Though he couldn't have been more than 30, there was something in his bearing that spoke of violence barely contained. Yet his eyes held a weariness that resonated deep within her. "What'll it be, mister?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. He looked up at her then, really looked, and Clara felt something shift in the air between them. "Whiskey, the real stuff. Not the rot gut you serve the miners." His voice was low and rough, like gravel ground under boot heels. Clara nodded and returned with a bottle from Hutchins's private stock, knowing she'd catch hell for it later, but somehow not caring. "You're new in town," she observed, pouring amber liquid into a glass that was cleaner than most. "Just passing through." He tossed back the whiskey in one smooth motion. "Though folks seem mighty interested in my business." Clara followed his gaze to where 2 men at the bar were trying hard to look like they weren't watching. She recognized them as deputies, probably alerted by the telegraph that brought news of wanted men and bounties. "Copper Creek sees all kinds," she said carefully. "Some stay longer than they intend." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "And some leave sooner than expected." The banjo player switched to a livelier tune, and the saloon girls began their evening dance, twirling their skirts and forcing laughter that fooled no one. Clara should have moved on to other customers, but something kept her rooted to the spot. "You work here long?" the stranger asked, refilling his own glass. 3 years. The words came out more bitter than she intended. "It's honest work." "Is it?" His gray eyes held no judgment, only a curious understanding that made her uncomfortable. Before she could respond, Jake Morrison stumbled over, whiskey heavy on his breath. Well, Clara's found herself a new friend." He leaned too close, his hand reaching for her waist. "Don't forget who your real customers are, darling." Clara stepped back, but Jake grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "Don't be getting high and mighty with me. Girl, you're nothing but a—" The stranger moved so fast Clara barely saw it. One moment Jake was pawing at her, the next he was on the floor, blood streaming from his nose. The stranger stood over him, deceptively relaxed, but Clara could see the coiled tension in every line of his body. "The lady said no," he said quietly, but his words carried through the suddenly silent saloon. Jake scrambled to his feet, hand going for the knife at his belt. "You don't know who you're messing with, drifter. I got friends in this town, and I've got a fast draw and nothing to lose." The stranger's hand hovered near his gun. "Your choice." The moment stretched taut as a bowstring. Clara held her breath, aware that violence in the silver dollar usually ended with someone dead and her cleaning blood off the floorboards. The other patrons had formed a loose circle, eager for entertainment. Jake's friends pulled him back, whispering urgently in his ear. With a final glare that promised retribution, he allowed himself to be led away, spitting blood and curses. The stranger returned to his seat as if nothing had happened, but Clara noticed the way he kept his gun hand free. The saloon slowly returned to its normal rhythm, though she could feel the undercurrent of tension that his actions had created. "You shouldn't have done that," she said softly, collecting empty glasses from his table to have an excuse to linger. "Jake Morrison holds grudges, and he's got brothers who are even meaner. Men like that only understand one language." He studied her with those penetrating eyes. "Besides, seemed like you could use a hand." Clara almost laughed at that. 3 years of fending off drunk minors, of Hutchins' wandering hands and cruel words, of slowly dying inside while pretending everything was fine, and now this dangerous stranger thought he could save her with one act of violence. "I can take care of myself," she said, but the words rang hollow even to her own ears. "I'm sure you can." He pulled out a silver dollar and placed it on the table. "For the whiskey, and for the trouble I've caused." It was more than the whole bottle cost, more than she'd see in tips in a week. Clara stared at it, then at him. "I can't?" "Sure you can." He stood, adjusting his gun belt with practiced ease. "Name's Jesse Cade. Figure you should know, seeing as how folks will be asking." The name hit her like cold water. Jesse Cade, even in a backwater like Copper Creek. They'd heard of him. Train robber, they said. Killer of men who deserved killing. A ghost who appeared and disappeared like smoke on the wind. She couldn't finish. Just a man looking for a drink and finding more than he bargained for. He touched the brim of his hat. "Evening, Miss Clara," she whispered. "Clara Whitfield." "Well, Miss Clara Whitfield, you might want to consider that sometimes the cage door opens when we least expect it. Question is whether we're brave enough to fly." He walked out of the saloon with the same fluid grace he'd entered with, leaving Clara standing there with a silver dollar in her hand and a strange flutter in her chest that felt dangerously like hope. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Clara served drinks and dodged hands, but her mind kept returning to gray eyes and cryptic words. When Jake Morrison returned with his brothers and a group of armed men, demanding to know where the stranger had gone, she honestly couldn't tell them. Jesse Cade had vanished into the desert night like he'd never existed at all. It was near midnight when Hutchins finally released her, grumbling about the expensive whiskey and the trouble with Morrison. Clara climbed the narrow stairs to her small room above the saloon, exhaustion weighing down her bones. She lit a candle and sat on the thin mattress, finally allowing herself to examine the silver dollar. It was real, solid and heavy in her palm. But it was what she found beneath it that made her breath catch. A small piece of paper with 2 words written in a bold hand. Tomorrow, midnight. Clara pressed the paper to her chest, feeling her heart race beneath the faded satin. Outside her window, the desert stretched endless and dark, full of dangers she knew all too well. But for the first time in 3 years, those dangers seemed less frightening than the slow death of staying in Copper Creek. She thought of Jesse Cade's words about cages and flying. She thought of the way he'd moved to defend her without hesitation, asking nothing in return. Most of all, she thought of the understanding in his eyes, as if he recognized something in her that she'd almost forgotten existed. The candle flickered in a draft from the ill-fitting window, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, its cry both mournful and free. Clara closed her eyes and made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, midnight. The cage door was opening. Dawn broke over Copper Creek with a crimson slash across the eastern sky, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold. Clara had barely slept, the piece of paper clutched in her hand like a lifeline. She rose before the other girls, moving through her morning routine with mechanical precision while her mind raced with possibilities and fears. The town was already buzzing with news. Jesse Cade, the infamous outlaw, had been spotted in the Silver Dollar. The telegraph lines had been burning all night, and by morning, wanted posters bearing his likeness were being nailed to every vertical surface on Main Street. Wanted, Jesse Cade, dead or alive, $5,000 reward. Clara paused before one of the posters on her way to fetch water from the well. The sketch didn't do him justice. It showed a hard-faced killer with dead eyes. Nothing like the weary understanding she'd seen in those gray depths. $5,000. More money than most folks in Copper Creek would see in a lifetime. Admiring your new beau. The voice made her jump. Tom Brennan, the town sheriff, stood behind her with his thumbs hooked in his gun belt. He was a tall man with a face like tanned leather and eyes that missed nothing. Just reading, Sheriff, Clara said, keeping her voice steady. Same as everyone else. That's so? Brennan spat tobacco juice into the dust. Funny thing, Jake Morrison says you and this Cade fellow seemed mighty friendly last night. He ordered whiskey. I served it. That's my job. Your job, Brennan repeated slowly, is whatever Mr. Hutchins says it is. And right now, he's saying you better remember where your loyalties lie. That outlaw shows his face again. You come find me. Understand? Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. Brennan studied her for a long moment before moving on, but she could feel his suspicion like a weight on her shoulders. The day dragged interminably. Hutchins watched her like a hawk, his small eyes following her every move. The other saloon girls whispered behind their hands, and the customers treated her with a mix of curiosity and wariness. Even the miners who usually pestered her kept their distance, as if her brief interaction with Jesse Cade had marked her somehow. You've got everyone spooked, said Rosalie, one of the older saloon girls. As they prepared for the evening crowd, they're saying Brennan's brought in Luke Daniels and his boys. Clara's heart sank. Luke Daniels was a bounty hunter with a reputation for bringing his quarry back draped over a saddle. He and his men were little better than the outlaws they hunted, but they got results. $5,000 is a lot of money. Rosalie continued, pinning up her blonde hair. Enough to turn honest folks into hunters. You'd best be careful, honey. Whatever that man said to you, it ain't worth dying for. But Rosalie didn't understand. She had chosen this life. Hard as it was, Clara had been sold into it, traded like cattle by parents who valued whiskey more than their daughter. For 3 years, she'd endured, survived, slowly withered. Now someone had offered her a glimpse of something else, and even if it was dangerous, even if it was foolish, she couldn't let it go. The evening crowd was larger than usual. Men drawn by the excitement of having a famous outlaw in their midst. They drank heavily and spoke in loud voices about what they'd do if Jesse Cade showed his face again. Hutchins, sensing opportunity, raised the whiskey prices, and hired extra muscle 2 mean-looking men who stood by the doors with shotguns. Clara moved through the crowd like a ghost, serving drinks and deflecting advances while her eyes continuously checked the clock above the bar. 10 o'clock, 11. Each minute felt like an hour. "Clara!" Hutchins' voice cut through the noise. "Get yourself over here." She found him in his office, a cramped room behind the bar that smelled of cigars and greed. Sheriff Brennan was there, along with Luke Daniels, a lean man with cold blue eyes and a face marked by violence. "Miss Whitfield," Daniels said, his voice smooth as oil. "I understand you had a conversation with Jesse Cade last night. I served him whiskey," Clara said for what felt like the 100th time. "Come now," Hutchins interjected, his face flushed with alcohol and excitement. "No need to be coy. This is your chance to do something good, girl. Help catch a dangerous criminal." "He didn't tell me anything," Clara insisted. "He drank, he paid, he left." Daniels leaned forward, and Clara caught the scent of leather and gun oil. "Jesse Cade doesn't just appear somewhere without reason. He's planning something, and I think you know what it is." "She's protecting him," Brennan said flatly. "Morrison says Cade defended her honor. Got her all starry-eyed." "Is that it?" Daniels asked, his eyes never leaving Clara's face. "Did the big bad outlaw sweep you off your feet? Let me tell you something about Jesse Cade. Miss, he's killed 7 men that we know of. He's robbed trains, banks, and stages. He'd sell his own mother for a fresh horse and a head start." Clara remained silent. Knowing anything she said would only make things worse. "Here's what's going to happen," Hutchins said, lighting a cigar with shaking hands. "You're going to stay right here where we can keep an eye on you. If Cade contacts you, if you see him, if you even dream about him, you tell us immediately. Otherwise, I'll have you arrested for aiding a fugitive. You know what happens to pretty girls in territorial prison?" The threat hung in the air like smoke. Clara nodded, her throat tight. "Good girl," Hutchins said. "Now get back to work. And remember, I've got eyes everywhere." Clara returned to the saloon floor, her legs unsteady. The clock showed 11:30. In 30 minutes, she was supposed to meet Jesse Cade, but how? Hutchins had stationed one of his new guards at the bottom of the stairs to the girls' quarters. The front and back doors were watched. She was trapped as surely as if they'd put her in chains. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Clara served drinks mechanically, her mind racing through possibilities. At 1:45, desperation seized her. She couldn't miss this chance. She wouldn't. That's when she saw him. Not Jesse, one of his watchers, a young Mexican man nursing a beer at the bar, whose eyes met hers with brief but unmistakable recognition. He'd been there for an hour, she realized, patient and unnoticed. As she passed by to collect empty glasses, he spoke without looking at her. "Spill something. Make a scene." Clara's pulse quickened. She moved toward a table of rowdy minors. A full tray of drinks balanced in her hands. It was almost too easy to stumble, sending whiskey and glass cascading over the men's laps. The eruption was immediate. Cursing, shouting, chairs scraping back. One minor lunged for her, and Clara let out a theatrical scream that brought everyone's attention to the chaos. In the confusion, she felt a hand on her arm. The Mexican man, pulling her toward the back rooms under the guise of helping her escape the angry miners. "Storage room," he whispered. "Windows open?" Clara didn't hesitate, while Hutchins and his guards rushed to contain the fight. She slipped through the kitchen and into the storage room. Sure enough, the small window that was always locked tight stood open to the night air. She hiked up her skirts and squeezed through, dropping into the alley behind the saloon. The Mexican man was already there with 2 horses. "Hurry," he said, boosting her into the saddle. "They'll figure it out quick." They rode hard through the back streets of Copper Creek, avoiding the main thoroughfares where Brennan's deputies patrolled. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs, every shadow a potential threat. But the Mexican man knew his business, leading her through a maze of alleys and abandoned lots until they reached the edge of town. Jesse Cade waited in the shadow of an old mining shack. nearly invisible in his dark clothes. His gray eyes found hers immediately. "Cutting it close," he said, but there was approval in his voice. "Thanks, Miguel." The Mexican man touched his hat brim and melted back into the darkness, leading the extra horse away. Clara suddenly found herself alone with the most wanted man in the territory. "Second thoughts?" Jessie asked, reading her hesitation. "They know," Clara said breathlessly. "The sheriff, bounty hunters, they're all looking for you. They threatened to arrest me." "I know." His voice was calm, matter of fact. "Luke Daniels and his boys rode in this afternoon. They'll tear this town apart looking for me." "Then why did you stay?" In the moonlight, she saw that ghost of a smile again. "Told you I'd be here." The simple statement hit her harder than any flowery declaration could have. He'd risked his life to keep his word to her. A saloon girl he'd known for all of 5 minutes. "This is madness," she whispered. "Maybe." Jessie moved closer, and she could see the watchful tension in every line of his body. "But sometimes madness is the only sane choice. You coming with me or not?" Clara looked back at Copper Creek, at the lights of the Silver Dollar where she'd spent 3 years dying slowly. She thought of Hutchins's threats, of Brennan's suspicion, of the cage that had held her for so long. "Don't look back," Jessie said quietly, echoing words he hadn't yet spoken but that would come to define their journey. Nothing there but ghosts and chains. A shout echoed from the town. They'd discovered her escape. Torches were being lit, horses saddled. The hunt was beginning. Clara turned away from her old life and faced the dark desert ahead. "Where are we going?" "Mexico, eventually. But first, we need to disappear." Jessie swung into his saddle with practiced ease. "Can you ride?" "I'll learn." That earned her a real smile, transforming his hard features. "That's the spirit. Stay close. Trust your horse. And whatever happens, don't look back." Clara finished. "I understand." They rode into the crimson dawn. 2 fugitives against the world, leaving nothing behind but dust and the echo of horses' hooves. Behind them, Copper Creek erupted like a kicked anthill. But Clara kept her eyes forward, focused on the broad shoulders of the man who'd opened her cage and invited her to fly. The desert swallowed them whole, vast and unforgiving. But for the first time in years, Clara felt like she could breathe. Whatever lay ahead, danger, hardship, maybe death, it had to be better than the slow suffocation she'd left behind. As the first rays of true dawn painted the sky, Jessie called back to her, "Welcome to freedom, Clara Whitfield. It's a hard road, but it's yours to ride." And ride she did, into the crimson dawn of a new life, where every breath tasted of sage and possibility, and the chains of the past fell away like dust in the wind. The red desert stretched endlessly before them, a sea of rock and sand painted in shades of rust and ochre. They'd been riding for 2 days, stopping only when the horses needed rest, pushing deeper into the wasteland that most folks avoided. Clara's body ached in places she didn't know could hurt. Her hands blistered from gripping the reins. But she didn't complain. Every mile between her and Copper Creek felt like a year of life returned. Jessie led them through landscapes that seemed torn from another world, towering red rock formations that glowed like fire in the sunset, deep arroyos carved by flash floods, forests of saguaro cacti standing like silent sentinels. He knew this country, reading signs in the placement of rocks and the flight patterns of hawks that Clara couldn't begin to understand. On the second night, they made camp in a shallow cave overlooking a dried riverbed. Jessie built a small fire, careful to use wood that wouldn't smoke, while Clara collapsed against her saddle, exhausted beyond measure. "Drink," he said, handing her a canteen. "Small sips. Water's precious out here." The water was warm and tasted of metal, but Clara had never appreciated anything more. She watched Jessie move about the camp with economical grace, checking the horses, scanning the horizon, always alert even in rest. "How long have you been running?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. Jessie paused in cleaning his rifle, his face half shadowed by the fire. 6 years, give or take. Started when I was 24. What happened?" For a long moment, She thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down the rifle and stared into the flames. Had a little ranch up in Colorado. Nothing fancy, just some cattle and a vegetable garden. My wife, Mary. She could make anything grow. Clara's heart skipped. Wife. Of course he'd had a life before becoming an outlaw. The Colton gang came through one autumn. Jesse continued, his voice flat and emotionless. I was in town getting supplies. By the time I got back, he trailed off, but Clara could fill in the horrific blanks. Sheriff said there wasn't enough evidence to pursue them. Said Mary must have invited them in. Brought it on herself. Jesse, I'm so sorry. I tracked them down myself. Took 2 months. Found them holed up in a cabin near the border. His gray eyes reflected the firelight like a wolf's. The law called it murder when I killed them. I called it justice. Been running ever since. They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Clara understood now the weariness she'd seen in him, the way he moved through the world like a man already half ghost. What about you? Jesse asked. What's a woman like you doing in a place like the Silver Dollar? Clara pulled her knees to her chest, making herself small. My parents sold me when I was 15. Needed money for drink and gambling debts. Hutchins paid them $50 and got a saloon girl who couldn't run away. Jesse's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, letting her continue at her own pace. I tried to escape once, early on, made it as far as Tucson before they caught me. Hutchins had his men. She touched her neck unconsciously, where the scars hid beneath her collar. After that, I learned to survive instead of live. Figured that was all there was. Until 2 nights ago. Until 2 nights ago, she agreed, when a dangerous outlaw defended my honor and reminded me that cages only hold us if we're too scared to test the bars. Jesse smiled, that rare expression that transformed him. Dangerous outlaw, is that what I am? Among other things. Clara found herself smiling back, though I'm starting to think the stories don't tell the whole truth. They never do. A coyote howled in the distance, its cry echoing off the canyon walls. Jesse immediately tensed, hand going to his gun. Just a coyote, Clara said. Maybe, but sounds carry in the desert. Could be signaling. He stood, moving to the cave entrance. Get some sleep. I'll keep watch. You haven't slept in 2 days. I've gone longer. Clara wanted to argue, but exhaustion pulled at her like lead weights. She curled up near the dying fire, using her folded jacket as a pillow. Despite the hard ground and the danger surrounding them, she felt safer than she had in years. She woke sometime later to find Jesse's duster draped over her like a blanket. He sat at the cave mouth, silhouetted against a sky blazing with stars. The desert night had turned cold, but his coat held residual warmth and smelled of leather and sage. You should have woken me for my turn at watch, she said softly. You needed the rest more. He didn't turn around. Besides, I don't sleep much anyway. Too many ghosts. Clara rose and joined him at the entrance, wrapping his coat around both their shoulders. He stiffened at first, then gradually relaxed. Look, he said, pointing at the sky. No stars like that in town. The Milky Way stretched across the heavens like a river of light. Clara had never seen anything so beautiful or felt so small. My wife used to say the stars were souls finding their way home. Jesse murmured. Said one day she'd be up there, showing me the way. Maybe she is. They sat in comfortable silence, sharing warmth and watching the celestial display. Clara became acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. Shoulder, hip, the brush of his hand as he adjusted the coat. It had been so long since anyone had touched her with gentleness that she'd forgotten how it felt. I need to tell you something, Jesse said eventually. The men hunting us, it's not just Daniels and the Copper Creek boys. The gang I used to ride with, before Mary, they want me dead too. I betrayed them when I went straight, then killed their partners in the Colton outfit. They've got a bounty on me, separate from the law. How many enemies do you have? Jesse Cade. More than friends, that's certain. He turned to look at her. You can still go back. I could leave you at the next town. Say I forced you to come. They might believe it." Clara met his gaze steadily. "I've spent 3 years wishing I was dead. You're offering me a chance to live. Even if it's dangerous, I'll take my chances with your enemies over my own slow decay." Something shifted in Jesse's expression, a softening around his eyes. "You're braver than you know, Clara Whitfield. Or more foolish. Sometimes they're the same thing." Dawn came slowly, painting the rocks in shades of rose and gold. They broke camp as the first light touched the canyon rim, erasing all signs of their presence. As they rode out, Clara looked back once at the cave that had sheltered them, then fixed her eyes forward. The third day brought new challenges. Water became scarce, and the horses began to show signs of fatigue. Jesse led them to a hidden spring he knew, barely more than a trickle among the rocks, but enough to refill their canteens and water the horses. "There's a trading post about half a day's ride from here," he said, studying the horizon. "Run by an old Apache named Joseph. He doesn't ask questions if the price is right. We can get supplies, maybe news of who's following us." They reached the trading post as the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. It was a low adobe building that seemed to grow from the desert itself, with corrals out back and an ancient cottonwood providing meager shade. Joseph turned out to be a weathered man of indeterminate age, with eyes that missed nothing. He greeted Jesse with a nod of recognition. "Been a while. Cade, heard you were dead." "Greatly exaggerated." Jesse helped Clara dismount, steadying her when her legs nearly buckled. "We need supplies, food, ammunition, grain for the horses." Joseph's gaze lingered on Clara, taking in her disheveled appearance and the way she stood close to Jesse. "The woman needs proper clothes. Desert will eat her alive in that fancy dress." Clara looked down at her torn and dusty saloon dress, suddenly self-conscious. Joseph disappeared into the post and returned with men's pants, a cotton shirt, and sturdy boots. "Not pretty, but practical," he said. "Take them. Desert doesn't care about pretty." While Clara changed in the back room, grateful for clothes that didn't restrict her movement, she could hear Jesse and Joseph talking in low voices. "Daniels came through yesterday," Joseph was saying. "5 men with him. They're maybe a day behind, following your trail." "Just Daniels?" "No, saw dust from the south too. Could be the Colton boys' kin, could be Apaches, could be both." Clara emerged in her new outfit, feeling strangely liberated by the simple act of wearing pants. Jesse's eyes widened slightly. Then he nodded approval. "Suits you," was all he said, but there was warmth in his voice. They loaded their supplies quickly, aware that every minute at the post increased their danger. Joseph accepted Jesse's gold without counting it, then surprised them both by pressing a small leather pouch into Clara's hand. "Medicine plants," he explained. "Desert teaches hard lessons. This helps with some of them." As they prepared to leave, Joseph pulled Jesse aside. Clara couldn't hear what was said, but Jesse's face grew grim. He clasped the old man's shoulder in thanks, then swung into his saddle. They rode hard for 2 hours before Jesse finally slowed. The landscape had changed again, becoming more broken, full of hiding places but also potential traps. "What did Joseph tell you?" Clara asked. Jesse's jaw was tight. "There's a storm coming, not rain dust, big one, moving up from Mexico. It'll hit tonight, maybe tomorrow morning." Clara had heard of the great dust storms that could swallow whole towns, turning day to night and choking the life from anything caught in the open. "Is that bad or good for us?" "Both. It'll hide our tracks, maybe slow down our pursuers. But if we're caught in it without shelter..." He didn't need to finish. They pushed on as the western sky began to take on an ominous brown tinge. The horses grew skittish, tossing their heads and whickering nervously. Even the desert creatures seemed to sense what was coming. Clara saw rabbits and lizards all heading in the same direction, away from the approaching storm. "There," Jesse pointed to a cluster of rocks ahead. "Might be caves." They found a deep overhang just as the first winds began to pick up, carrying the taste of dust. Jesse worked frantically to secure the horses in the most protected area, while Clara gathered their supplies into the shelter. The storm hit just as the sun began to set, turning the world into a howling chaos of red-brown dust. Clara had never experienced anything like it. The wind screamed like a living thing, and the dust found every gap in their shelter, coating everything in fine grit. Jesse pulled her deeper into the overhang, wrapping bandanas around both their faces. They huddled together as the storm raged, the horses stamping nervously nearby. "How long will it last?" Clara shouted over the wind. "Could be hours, could be days." Jesse's arm tightened around her. "But we're safe here. I've weathered worse." As if to challenge his words, a tremendous gust sent debris flying past their shelter. Clara pressed closer to Jesse, feeling the solid warmth of him against the chaos outside. His heart beat steadily under her palm, a rhythm that somehow made the storm seem less terrifying. "Tell me about Mexico," she said, needing something to focus on besides the howling dark. "What's it like?" Jesse's voice was muffled by the bandana, but still audible. "Different, wider skies, if you can believe it. Mountains that touch the clouds. Villages where no one cares about your past, only your present. A place where people like us can disappear and maybe find some peace. It sounds like a dream." "Maybe, but I've learned even dreams are worth chasing when the alternative is nightmare." The storm raged on, but in their small shelter, Clara felt an odd sense of peace. She was dirty, exhausted, hunted, and caught in a deadly storm, but she was also free, and she wasn't alone. As the night deepened and the storm showed no signs of abating, Jesse began to speak again, his voice a low rumble against the wind. He told her about places he'd seen, people he'd met, small moments of beauty found in a life lived on the run. Clara found herself sharing two memories from before the silver dollar, dreams she'd thought were dead, pieces of herself she'd hidden away for so long. When exhaustion finally claimed her, she fell asleep with her head on Jesse's shoulder, his duster wrapped around them both. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the desert, but inside their small cave, two lost souls had found a moment of shelter, not just from the dust and wind, but from the loneliness that had haunted them both for so long. The dust storm passed with the dawn, leaving the world transformed. Everything was coated in a fine red powder, as if the desert had been ground up and redistributed across the landscape. Clara woke to find Jesse already outside, checking the horses and scanning the horizon with his field glasses. "Storm covered our tracks," he said as she emerged, shaking dust from her hair. "But it covered theirs too. Could be anywhere." They broke their fast with hardtack and water, the simple meal made gritty by the omnipresent dust. Clara noticed Jesse favoring his left arm and caught a glimpse of blood seeping through his shirt. "You're hurt. It's nothing. Old wound that opened up." He tried to wave her off, but Clara was having none of it. "Let me see." Reluctantly, Jesse removed his shirt, revealing a poorly healed bullet wound in his shoulder that had indeed torn open, probably during their hard riding. Clara sucked in a breath at the sight of other scars cross-hatching his torso, the map of a violent life written in flesh. "Sit," she commanded, surprising them both with her firm tone. She retrieved Joseph's medicine pouch and her canteen, glad now for the old trader's foresight. Jesse submitted to her ministrations in silence, though she saw his jaw tighten when she cleaned the wound. The medicinal plants formed a poultice that she bound with strips torn from her old petticoat. "Where did you learn healing?" Jesse asked as she worked. "My mother, before she discovered whiskey, loved her more than family." Clara tied off the bandage. "She was a midwife once, taught me herbs and healing before she taught me disappointment." "Clara." Jesse caught her hand as she pulled away. "Thank you." The simple touch sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with the rising sun. She found herself studying his face, memorizing the lines around his eyes, the scar that bisected his left eyebrow, the way his gray eyes softened when he looked at her. A rifle shot shattered the moment. The bullet struck the rock face above their heads, sending sharp fragments flying. Jesse moved with a lightning speed, pulling Clara behind cover while reaching for his gun. "Well, well," a voice echoed off the canyon walls. "Jesse Cade, thought we'd lost you in that storm." Clara recognized the voice with a chill. Frank Colton, brother to the men Jesse had killed. She'd heard Hutchins talking about him once, describing a man who collected scalps and enjoyed his work too much. "Got 5 men with me, Cade," Frank continued. "You're outnumbered and outgunned, but I'm feeling generous. Send out the woman, and we'll make your death quick." Jesse's face had gone cold and hard, all warmth extinguished. This was the killer from the wanted posters, the man who'd survived 6 years with a price on his head. "Stay down," he told Clara, checking his ammunition. "No matter what happens, stay behind cover. Jesse, promise me." She nodded, throat tight with fear. Jesse positioned himself at the edge of their shelter, studying the terrain with a tactician's eye. "Interesting offer. Frank," he called back. "Here's mine. You and your boys ride away now, and I won't send you to join your brothers." The response was another shot. Closer this time. Clara could see movement among the rocks, men spreading out, trying to flank their position. "Always were a cocky bastard," Frank snarled. "Boys, light 'em up!" The canyon erupted in gunfire. Bullets whined off rocks, filling the air with dust and debris. Jesse returned fire with deadly precision, his rifle cracking steadily. Clara pressed herself against the rock wall, hands over her ears, wishing she had a weapon of her own. Through the chaos, she heard a cry of pain. One of Frank's men was down. Jesse had shifted position, using angles Clara couldn't understand to make their shelter into a fortress. But their ammunition wouldn't last forever, and Frank's men were still moving, still shooting. "Clara," Jesse's voice cut through the noise. "My saddlebags! There's a spare pistol!" She crawled to their supplies, bullets zipping overhead. Her hands shook as she found the weapon, a heavy Colt revolver. She'd never held a gun before, but there was no time for fear. A figure appeared at the side of their shelter. One of Frank's men had circled around. He grinned, raising his rifle, and Clara acted without thinking. The Colt bucked in her hands, the shot going wide but causing the man to duck back. "That's my girl!" Jesse shouted, dropping another attacker with a well-placed shot. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The air filled with powder smoke and the acrid smell of gunfire. Clara fired twice more, not hitting anything but keeping the flankers at bay while Jesse worked his deadly magic with the rifle. Then, suddenly, silence. "Frank?" Jesse called. "You still breathing?" "Still here. Cade." The outlaw's voice was strained now, no longer cocky. "You killed 2 of my boys. I'll kill the rest if you don't back off." There was a long pause. Clara could hear harsh breathing, someone moaning in pain, the nervous stamps of horses. Finally, Frank spoke again. "This ain't over, Cade. You hear me? I'll follow you to hell itself." "Get in line," Jesse muttered, but kept his rifle ready. They heard horses moving away, the sound gradually fading into the distance. Jesse waited a full 10 minutes before lowering his weapon. And even then, he moved cautiously as he checked the bodies of the fallen outlaws. "They're gone," he said finally. "For now." Clara emerged from cover on shaking legs, the Colt still clutched in her hands. Jesse gently took it from her, safety it, and pulled her into a fierce embrace. "You did good," he whispered into her hair. "Real good. I almost shot someone. But you didn't freeze. You fought." He pulled back to look at her. Most folks can't do that their first time under fire. Clara became aware that her whole body was trembling. The reality of what had just happened crashed over her. She'd been in a gunfight. Men had died, and she'd come within inches of death herself. "Is it always like this?" she asked. "No," Jesse said honestly. "Sometimes it's worse. They couldn't stay at the shelter. Frank would regroup, maybe join forces with Daniels." Jesse quickly looted the dead outlaw's weapons and ammunition while Clara fought down nausea. This was the reality of life on the run. She realized violence and death as constant companions. They rode hard through the morning, Jesse leading them through increasingly difficult terrain. The red rocks gave way to a maze of narrow canyons. some barely wide enough for the horses. Clara's earlier trembling had been replaced by a strange numbness, her mind still processing the morning's violence. Around midday, they stopped at a hidden spring Jesse knew, while the horses drank. He taught Clara how to properly handle the colt. "Never point it at anything you don't intend to kill," he said, adjusting her grip. "Squeeze the trigger, don't jerk it, and always know what's behind your target. I don't know if I can kill someone." Clara admitted, "Then you'll die." His words were harsh, but his tone was gentle. "Out here, hesitation is death. Those men wouldn't think twice about what they do to you." Clara thought of Frank Colton's leering voice and shuddered. "Teach me to shoot properly, then." They spent an hour practicing, using the dead men's ammunition. Clara's aim improved quickly, and she found an odd satisfaction in hitting the targets Jesse set up. It was power, she realized, the first real power she'd had in years. As they prepared to move on, Jesse surprised her by handing her a gun belt. "Took it off one of Frank's boys. Should fit you well enough." Clara strapped on the belt, the weight of the holstered Colt strange but not unpleasant. She caught Jesse watching her with an unreadable expression. "What?" "Nothing. Just, you're taking to this life quicker than I expected. Did you think I'd fall apart?" "Most would have." He swung into his saddle. "But then, you're not most people." Clara Whitfield. They rode in companionable silence through the afternoon, but Clara could sense Jesse's growing tension. He kept checking their back trail, scanning the ridgelines, hand never far from his gun. "What is it?" she finally asked. "We're being followed. Have been for the last hour." Clara's heart skipped. "Frank?" "No. Someone better, staying just out of sight, matching our pace." Jesse's jaw was tight. "Professional?" "Daniels? Maybe, or worse." He pointed to a cluster of boulders ahead. "We'll make our stand there if we have to." But as they approached the rocks, a figure stepped out from behind them, a grizzled man in his 50s, wearing a deputy's badge and holding a rifle with casual competence. "That's far enough, Jesse," the man said, and Clara was shocked to hear regret in his voice. "Been a long chase." Jesse reined up, his hand hovering near his gun. "Tom Garrett. Should have known. Still hiring out to the highest bidder? Man's got to make a living." Garrett's eyes flicked to Clara. "This the girl from Copper Creek? Pretty thing to die for, Jesse." "She's got nothing to do with this. She does now." Garrett sighed. "Look, I got no quarrel with you personal-like, but $5,000 is $5,000. Plus what Hutchins is offering for the girl's return." Clara felt her blood turn to ice. Return to Hutchins, to the silver dollar, to that living death. "I'll die first," she said, her hand finding the Colt's grip. Garrett's eyebrows rose. "Well now, found yourself a wildcat, haven't you, Jesse?" "Last warning, Tom," Jesse said quietly. "Right away." "Can't do it. Got a reputation to maintain." Garrett shifted slightly, and Clara saw two more men emerge from cover, rifles trained on them. "3 against 2, and one of you green as grass. Don't make me kill you, boy." The moment stretched taut, everyone poised on the edge of violence. Clara's mouth was dry as dust, her heart hammering so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. This was different from the morning's chaos. This was calculated, cold, inevitable. Then Jesse did something unexpected. He laughed. "You always were too careful. Tom," he said, and in one fluid motion, he drew and fired. Not at Garrett, at the canyon wall behind him. The shot struck a precariously balanced boulder that Jesse must have noticed earlier. It toppled, starting a small avalanche that sent Garrett diving for cover. "Ride!" Jesse shouted, spurring his horse forward. Clara didn't need to be told twice. She bent low over her horse's neck as bullets whined past. Jesse's horse screamed and stumbled, hit, but he rolled clear, came up running, and vaulted onto Clara's horse behind her. "Go! Go!" She gave the horse its head, trusting Jesse's arms around her as he fired back at their pursuers. The canyon became a blur of red rock and dust. the horses' hooves thundering on stone. Behind them, shouts and gunfire, but growing fainter. They burst out of the canyon into open desert, the horse laboring under their combined weight. Jesse guided them toward another rock formation, constantly checking behind them. "We can't outrun them like this," Clara said. "Don't have to, just have to reach." He pointed ahead. "There." It was another cave system, but larger, more complex. Jesse slid off the exhausted horse and led them inside, deep into the twisting passages. In the darkness, Clara could hear water dripping, could smell minerals and age. "Old mine," Jesse explained, his voice echoing strangely. "Played out years ago. Goes for miles underground. Easy to get lost if you don't know the way." "Do you know the way?" "I did once. Hope I still do." They moved deeper into the mountain, leading the tired horse, feeling their way along rough walls. Behind them, very faint, Clara could hear pursuit entering the cave. "They'll have torches," she whispered. "Let them. These tunnels branch a dozen ways. They'll need luck to choose right." Jesse found what he was looking for, a narrow passage leading upward. "We go up. They'll expect us to go deeper." It was a nightmare journey in the dark, squeezing through passages barely wide enough for the horse, climbing rough slopes, always listening for sounds of pursuit. Clara's world narrowed to the feel of Jesse's hand in hers, the sound of his breathing, the patient clip-clop of hooves on stone. After what felt like hours, they emerged on the far side of the mountain. The sun was setting, painting the desert in familiar shades of red and gold. They were alone, their pursuers lost in the labyrinth below. Jesse slumped against a rock, exhaustion finally showing. "We need to find water for the horse, food, another mount. You're bleeding again." Clara could see the dark stain spreading on his shirt. "It can wait." "No, it can't." She moved to him, hands already reaching for the medical supplies. "We're no good to each other if you bleed to death." As she worked on his wound by the dying light, Clara realized something had changed. The morning's trembling fear was gone, replaced by a harder resolve. She'd been tested by fire and hadn't broken. More than that, she'd found strength she didn't know existed. "What are you thinking?" Jesse asked, watching her face. "That maybe I was born for this life," she said. "That maybe all those years in the Silver Dollar were just preparing me for running with Jesse Cade." He caught her hand, his touch gentle despite the calluses. "This life ends one of two ways. Clara, a bullet or a noose. I wouldn't wish it on anyone." "But it's life," she said fiercely. "Real life, not the slow death I was living. Every breath out here means something, even if it might be my last." Jesse studied her in the fading light, and she saw something kindle in his eyes. Respect, admiration, and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. "All right then," he said finally. "If you're sure. I've never been more sure of anything." He stood, steadier now, and offered her his hand. "Then we'd best move. Mexico's still a long way off, and we've got a lot of ground to cover." Clara took his hand, feeling the connection between them like a living thing. Whatever came next, Daniels, Frank Colton, the whole violent world arrayed against them, they'd face it together. As they led the weary horse into the gathering darkness, Clara touched the gun at her hip and smiled grimly. She was no longer the frightened saloon girl who'd climbed through a window 3 nights ago. She was Clara Whitfield, rider of the Outlaw Trail, and she was finally, truly alive. The border town of San Rafael squatted on the edge of civilization like a festering wound. It was the kind of place where law was a suggestion and anonymity could be bought for the price of a drink. Jesse and Clara rode in just after sunset, their stolen horses, acquired from an abandoned ranch 2 days prior, laboring under the desert heat. They'd been running for a week now, zigzagging across the territory, doubling back, using every trick Jesse knew to throw off pursuit. But supplies were running low, and they needed medicine for Jesse's wound, which had begun to show signs of infection despite Clara's best efforts. "Keep your hat low and your hand near your gun," Jesse murmured as they entered the town's main street. "This place is full of eyes that see too much." The street was lined with cantinas, gambling halls, and establishments of even less reputable nature. Men lounged in doorways, watching the newcomers with predatory interest. Clara felt their gazes like dirty hands on her skin, but kept her expression neutral, her posture confident. She'd learned much in their week of flight. They hitched their horses outside a general store that looked marginally less disreputable than its neighbors. Jesse moved stiffly, the fever from his infection making him unsteady, though he hid it well. Inside, the proprietor, a thin Mexican man with careful eyes, took their measure instantly. "Medicine and supplies," Jesse said quietly, laying gold coins on the counter. "No questions." The man nodded, gathering items with practiced efficiency. Clara noticed how he included extra bandages, a bottle of laudanum, and ammunition without being asked. This was a man who knew his clientele. As they conducted their business, Clara became aware of a subtle shift in the store's atmosphere. A woman had entered, blonde, beautiful in a hard way, wearing a traveling dress that had seen better days. She glanced at Jesse, and something passed between them that made Clara's stomach clench. "Jesse Cade," the woman said softly. "Never thought I'd see you again." "Lillian." Jesse's voice was carefully neutral. "You're a long way from Denver. Could say the same about you." Lillian's eyes found Clara, cataloging her from boots to hat. "Trading up in the world. I see." Clara felt her hand drift to her gun, but Jesse's slight shake of his head stopped her. This was dangerous in a different way than Frank Colton or Tom Garrett. "We're just passing through," Jesse said. "Aren't we all?" Lillian smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Buy a lady a drink? For old time's sake?" Jesse hesitated, and in that moment, Clara saw their history written in the space between them. This woman had meant something to him once, maybe after his wife's death, maybe during those early years on the run. "One drink," he agreed finally. "Clara, why don't you take the supplies to the horses?" "I'll stay," Clara said firmly. Lillian laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, she's protective. How sweet. Don't worry, honey." "I'm not looking to steal him. Had my chance at that years ago." They found a table in the cantina next door. The three of them an awkward triangle of past and present. Lillian ordered whiskey and downed it like medicine. "Heard about the price on your head," she said to Jesse. "5,000 is serious money, enough to make even old friends consider options. That a threat, Lil?" "An observation." She poured another drink. "Luke Daniels was through here yesterday, had 8 men with him now. Said he nearly had you at Skeleton Canyon, but you vanished like smoke." Clara remembered Skeleton Canyon, the frantic ride through darkness. Jesse delirious with fever, her navigating by instinct and prayer. They'd hidden in an abandoned mission for 2 days while she fought to break his fever with Joseph's herbs and sheer determination. "He also said something interesting," Lillian continued. "Said Hutchins from Copper Creek upped his offer for the girl's return. $2,000, alive and unharmed. That's more than most folks see in a lifetime." Clara's hand found Jesse's under the table, and he squeezed it reassuringly. "What do you want, Lillian?" Jesse asked tiredly. "Maybe I want to help." "For old time's sake." She studied Clara with those hard eyes. "Or maybe I'm curious what kind of woman could make Jesse Cade risk everything. He wasn't the rescuing type when I knew him." "People change," Clara said, meeting her gaze steadily. "Do they?" Lillian turned back to Jesse. "You still dream about Mary? Still call out her name in your sleep?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Clara felt Jesse tense beside her, but didn't pull away. She'd heard him call out in his sleep during his fever, had held him through the nightmares. She knew about the ghosts that haunted him. "That's done," Jesse said quietly. "Leave it buried. Nothing stays buried in the desert. Jesse, you should know that." Lillian stood, smoothing her dress. "There's talk of a federal marshal coming down from Prescott. Someone who knows you from before. Thought you should know." She walked away without looking back, leaving them with the weight of her warnings. Jesse stared at his untouched whiskey, lost in thought. "Old lover?" Clara asked, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Old mistake, Jesse corrected. Met her after Mary died, when I was trying to drink myself to death in Denver. She was running from her own ghosts. We were bad for each other. Brought out the worst instead of the best. She's still in love with you. No, she's in love with the idea of what we could have been. But that road led nowhere good. He looked at Clara then, his gray eyes intense despite the fever. This is different. You're different. Before Clara could respond, a commotion erupted near the cantina's entrance. 3 men had entered, badges glinting in the lamplight. Local law, probably as corrupt as everything else in San Rafael, but still dangerous. Time to go, Jesse murmured. But as they stood, one of the lawmen spotted them. You there! Stop! Jesse's hand went to his gun, but Clara grabbed his arm. You're in no condition for a fight. Follow my lead. She turned to face the lawman, letting a tremor enter her voice. Oh, thank goodness. Officers, please, you have to help us. This man, she gestured at Jesse. He's very ill. We were robbed on the road, and I fear he may die if we don't find proper shelter. The lawman hesitated, taken aback by her sudden transformation into a frightened woman. Clara pressed her advantage, actually managing a few tears. Please, he's my husband. We were traveling to visit family when those awful men attacked us. They took everything except what little gold we had hidden. She clutched at the lead lawman's sleeve. Is there somewhere safe we could rest? Just for the night. It was a gamble, but Clara had learned to read men in her years at the Silver Dollar. These weren't dedicated manhunters like Daniels or Garrett. They were small-town bullies looking for easy prey. A sick man and his worried wife didn't fit that description. There's a boarding house on 2nd Street, the lawman said gruffly, clearly uncomfortable with her tears. Mother Garcia runs it. She'll take you in if you can pay. Oh, thank you. Bless you. Clara supported Jesse as they left, maintaining the fiction. She could feel him shaking with suppressed laughter despite his fever. Where did that come from? He asked once they were clear. 3 years of playing whatever role kept me safe. Clara replied, though I much prefer being myself. They didn't go to Mother Garcia's. Instead, they retrieved their horses and rode out of San Rafael within the hour. Unwilling to test their luck further, Jesse swayed in his saddle, the brief exertion having taxed his remaining strength. 2 miles outside town, Clara spotted what they needed, an abandoned adobe house, probably left behind when the local mine played out. It would provide shelter while she tended to Jesse properly. Inside, she made him as comfortable as possible on an old straw mattress while she built a small fire. The laudanum would help with the pain while she cleaned the wound properly. But she could see the infection had spread. Red streaks ran up his shoulder, and his skin burned with fever. You need a real doctor, she said, fear creeping into her voice. No doctor would treat me without turning me in. Jesse caught her hand. You've done fine so far. I trust you. Clara wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. Instead, she set about doing what she could, using all the knowledge her mother had passed down before the whiskey took her. She cleaned the wound again, applied a poultice of Joseph's herbs mixed with tequila from their supplies, and wrapped it tightly. Jesse drifted in and out of consciousness as she worked, mumbling fragments of memory and warning. She heard Mary's name, as Lillian had said, but also her own, spoken with a tenderness that made her heart ache. As night deepened, Clara allowed herself to really look at this man who'd changed her life so completely. The fever had stripped away his usual guardedness, leaving him vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. She traced the scars on his chest, each one a story of survival, and wondered how many more they'd both collect before this journey ended. Don't leave, Jesse muttered, his hand finding hers. Never, Clara promised, and meant it. She must have dozed, because she woke to the sound of horses approaching. Instantly alert, she grabbed her coat and moved to the window. Dawn was breaking, painting the desert in soft pastels, and 3 riders were approaching the house. Not lawmen, their clothes were too fine, their horses too good. Clara's blood chilled as she recognized the lead rider. She'd seen his type before in the Silver Dollar. Men who bought and sold anything, including people. Slave traders. She breathed. They must have heard about the price on her head. Decided to collect. Jessie stirred, fighting toward consciousness. How many? 3. Well armed. Clara checked her ammunition. Can you shoot? If I have to. He struggled to sit up, reaching for his rifle. But you're the one they want alive. They won't be careful with me. The riders had stopped just out of effective pistol range, studying the house. Clara could see them conferring, probably deciding on the best approach. Mr. Cade, one called out. Miss Whitfield, we know you're in there. We're here to make a deal. The only deal involves lead, Clara shouted back, surprising herself with her ferocity. Now, miss, no need for unpleasantness. Mr. Hutchins is willing to forgive all. He just wants his property back. You come with us peaceful-like, and we'll let Cade ride away. Otherwise, he let the threat hang. Clara felt rage rise in her throat like bile. Property. After everything, she was still just property to men like Hutchins. Here's my counteroffer, she called, and fired through the window. Her shot went wide, but it sent the message. The traders scattered, diving for cover behind rocks and scrub. Return fire peppered the adobe walls, showering them with dust and fragments. So much for negotiation, Jessie said dryly, positioning himself at another window despite his weakness. The battle was different from the others, slower, more calculated. The traders were patient, professional. They kept up steady fire, trying to pin Clara and Jessie down while one of them circled to the back. Clara caught the flanking movement and shifted position, catching the man as he tried to reach the back door. Her shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crawling back to cover. Good shot, Jessie approved, then fired his rifle at another trader who'd gotten too bold, but they both knew the mathematics were against them. Limited ammunition, Jessie's weakness, the trader's patience. It would end only one way unless something changed. That change came from an unexpected quarter. Dust on the horizon announced new riders approaching fast. Clara counted at least 6, riding hard toward the sound of gunfire. Daniels? She asked. Jessie studied them through the window. No. Look at how they ride. The newcomers swept down on the scene like avenging angels, catching the traders in a crossfire. Clara recognized the lead rider, Miguel, the man who'd helped her escape from Copper Creek. Thought you might need help, Jefe. Miguel called out as the surviving traders fled. Lillian said you were heading this way. Clara felt a mix of relief and suspicion. Lillian sent you? She owed Jessie a debt from Denver days, Miguel explained, dismounting. Figured this squared it. They had no choice but to accept the help. Miguel's men, a mix of Mexicans and Americans, all with the look of men outside the law, helped move Jessie to a wagon they'd brought. One of them, an older man with medical training from the war, examined Jessie's wound with professional efficiency. Infection's bad, but not fatal if treated right, he pronounced. I've got medicines that'll help. As they prepared to move out, Miguel pulled Clara aside. We'll take you to our camp in the mountains. It's safe. Daniels won't find it. But after that, you're on your own. This squares Jessie's debt, nothing more. Clara nodded, understanding. In this life, even kindness had a price. They rode through the morning, Jessie unconscious in the wagon bed with Clara beside him. She held his hand, willing her strength into him, and watched the landscape change from desert to pine-covered mountains. It was beautiful country, but she couldn't appreciate it, not with Jessie burning with fever and their enemies closing in. The camp was well hidden, a collection of cabins in a box canyon accessible only by a narrow trail. Women and children moved among the buildings. This wasn't just an outlaw hideout, but a community of those who couldn't live within the law's boundaries. As they carried Jessie into one of the cabins, Clara caught a glimpse of their reflection in a window. She hardly recognized herself. Sun-darkened, lean, her hand resting naturally on her gun. The saloon girl was gone, replaced by someone harder, stronger. But as she sat beside Jessie's bed, watching the healer work to save him, Clara wondered if strength would be enough. The world seemed determined to tear them apart, to collect its price in blood. How long could they run? How long before their luck ran out? Jesse's eyes opened, finding hers with effort. Still here? Always, she said, squeezing his hand. He smiled weakly. My guardian angel with a 6-gun. Rest, she told him. Get strong. We've still got miles to go. As Jesse drifted back to sleep, Clara stared out the window at the gathering clouds. A storm was coming, in more ways than one. But for now, they were safe, together, and alive. In this life, that was victory enough. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But Clara Whitfield, who'd once been too scared to dream of freedom, now faced the future with steady hands and an unbreaking will. She'd found her strength in the crucible of the desert, forged in gunfire and tempered by love. Whatever came next, she was ready. The night sky over the mountains was the color of old blood, heavy with clouds that promised violence. Clara stood watch at the canyon entrance, rifle across her knees, listening to the wind moan through the pines. Jesse had recovered enough to travel, but Miguel's news that morning had changed everything. Daniels joined forces with Frank Colton, Miguel had said, his usually cheerful face grim. They've got 20 men between them, plus a federal marshal named Wade Garrison. They know you're somewhere in these mountains. Wade Garrison. Jesse had gone pale at the name, and Clara learned why. Garrison had been his friend before Mary's death, had tried to bring him in peacefully after the Colton killings. Jesse's refusal had turned friendship to bitter pursuit. Now they had to run again, but the net was closing. Every pass would be watched, every town alerted. Their only chance was to reach the desert beyond the mountains, then make for Mexico before the combined forces caught them. You should rest, Jesse said, emerging from the darkness. He moved easier now. The infection beaten back by the healer's medicines and Clara's care. Long ride tomorrow. Couldn't sleep. Clara didn't take her eyes off the trail. Keep thinking about what Miguel said. 20 men. Jesse, how do we fight 20 men? We don't. We run smarter. Hide better. He settled beside her, their shoulders touching. Or, you could stay here. Miguel's people would protect you. In a year, maybe 2, Hutchins will give up, find another girl to torment. You could have a life. Clara turned to look at him, seeing the pain behind the offer. And you? I'll lead them away. Give you a chance at something better than dying beside an outlaw. The slap caught him off guard, snapping his head to the side. Clara's eyes blazed with fury. Don't you dare, she hissed. Don't you dare try to noble your way out of this. I didn't risk everything to be left behind like excess baggage. Jesse touched his cheek, a rueful smile playing at his lips. You hit harder than you used to. I do a lot of things harder than I used to. Clara's anger faded as quickly as it had come. We're in this together, Jesse Cade, for better or worse. That sounds almost like a vow. Maybe it is. They sat in comfortable silence, watching clouds scud across the stars. In the morning, they'd ride into almost certain death, but tonight they had this, a moment of peace stolen from a violent world. Tell me about after, Clara said suddenly. When we reach Mexico. What then? Jesse was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, there's a valley I know, near a village called San Cristobal. Good water, fertile land, a place where a man could raise horses, maybe some cattle, where a woman could have a garden, like Mary did. And us, what would we be? Whatever you want us to be. His hand found hers in the darkness. I'm not an easy man. Clara, I've got blood on my hands and ghosts in my head, but what I feel for you, it's clean. It's the only clean thing left in me. Clara turned his hand over, tracing the calluses and scars. I love you too, she said simply. Now let's stop talking like we're already dead and figure out how to live. Dawn came too soon, bringing with it a cold wind that smelled of rain. They left Miguel's camp with minimal supplies, traveling light for speed. Miguel himself rode with them to the edge of his territory, his face troubled. There's something else, he said as they prepared to part. "Lillian's in Daniel's camp. Saw her riding with them yesterday." Clara felt Jessie stiffen beside her. "You sure? My scout's got good eyes. She's there voluntary-like, not a prisoner." Miguel spat. "Watch your back. Jefe, that woman's got snake blood." They pushed hard through the morning, following game trails and creek beds, always staying off the main paths. By noon, the promised storm was building, the sky turning an ominous green-gray. "Could work for us," Jessie said, studying the clouds. "Storm will cover our tracks, make searching harder." But Clara could see the danger too. These mountain storms could be killers, bringing flash floods and lightning, turning trails into death traps. They were gambling with nature now, as well as men. The first fat raindrops were falling when they heard the horses. Many horses moving fast on a lower trail. Clara and Jessie quickly led their mounts into a thick stand of pine, hearts pounding as the sounds grew closer. Through the trees, they could see them, a line of riders moving with purpose. Clara recognized Daniel's lean form, Frank Colton's bulk, and there, riding between them like a queen among courtiers, Lillian in a rain slicker. But it was the man leading them that made Jessie curse softly. Wade Garrison looked like what he was, a man who'd never failed to bring in his quarry, even from a distance. Clara could see the competence in how he sat his horse, the way his eyes swept the terrain. "They're heading for Skeleton Pass," Jessie whispered. "Trying to cut us off." "Will they? Not if we move now." They slipped away as silent as shadows, urging their horses to a dangerous pace as the storm built around them. Thunder crashed overhead, and the rain came in sheets, turning the trail into a muddy torrent. Clara had never experienced anything like it. The world disappeared behind walls of water, visibility reduced to mere feet. Lightning split the sky, showing snapshot images of Jessie ahead, trees bending in the wind, the trail crumbling at the edges. "Here!" Jessie shouted over the storm, pointing to a narrow defile. "Shortcut!" The passage was barely wide enough for the horses, walls of rock rising on either side. Water poured through it like a sluice, but Jessie pushed on, and Clara followed, trusting his knowledge even as terror clawed at her throat. They emerged on the other side just as a tremendous crack split the air. Clara looked back to see a massive pine falling, blocking the defile they'd just passed through. If they'd been seconds slower. "Keep moving," Jessie called. The storm raged for another hour, nature's fury making human pursuit impossible. When it finally began to slacken, they found shelter in a cave to rest the exhausted horses and themselves. "We bought some time," Jessie said, wringing water from his coat. "But Garrison's too smart to give up. He'll figure out where we went." Clara was checking their ammunition, dismayed to find much of their powder wet despite their precautions. "We're down to maybe 20 good rounds between us. Then we'll have to make them count." As the afternoon wore on, the clouds began to break, revealing patches of sky the color of old brass. They resumed their journey, descending now toward the desert floor. But Clara could feel pursuit like pressure on her neck. It came at sunset, in the worst possible place. They were traversing a long slope of loose shale, no cover, nowhere to run, when the shot rang out. Jessie's horse screamed and went down, sending him rolling down the slope. "Jessie!" Clara dismounted, skidding down to where he lay, stunned but alive. More shots followed, kicking up spurts of shale around them. Clara dragged Jessie behind the fallen horse, their only cover on the barren slope. "Well, well!" Frank Colton's voice echoed down. "End of the line. Cade, nowhere to run now." Clara peered over the horse's body. She could see them spread out along the ridge above, at least a dozen men, probably more out of sight. Her heart sank. "Clara," a different voice. "Lillian, you don't have to die here. Daniels will deal with you fair. Just throw down your guns." "Like hell," Clara muttered, checking her colt. Jessie was struggling to focus, blood running from a gash on his forehead. "How many rounds?" "6 in the colt, maybe 8 in your rifle that stayed dry." He laughed, short and bitter. "Against 20 men, not good odds. We've beaten worse." "No, love, we haven't." He gripped her hand. "Listen to me. When they come, you run. Head for those rocks to the east. I'll hold them as long as— I told you before, Clara interrupted fiercely. We're in this together. If this is where it ends, then I'll take as many with us as I can. Jessie looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, together. They could hear the posse moving, spreading out to flank them. Soon they'd be surrounded, picked off at leisure. Clara said a silent prayer to whoever might be listening, then readied her weapon. But the expected attack didn't come. Instead, a single rider appeared on the ridge Wade Garrison, badge glinting in the dying light. Jessie, he called. It's Wade. I'm coming down to talk. Nobody shoots. It's a trap, Clara hissed. Maybe, but Wade was never a liar. Jessie raised his voice. Come ahead, but slow. Garrison descended carefully, hands visible, stopping just out of pistol range. Up close. Clara could see he was older than Jessie, with kind eyes that seemed at odds with his profession. Been a long chase, old friend, Garrison said. I'm not your friend anymore. Wade, that ended when you chose the law over justice. Maybe so. Garrison dismounted, showing he meant no immediate threat. But I remember the man you were, the man who helped me bring in the Carson gang, the man who stood as my best man when I married Sarah. That man died with Mary. Did he? Garrison stepped closer. Because I see him sitting there, protecting a woman he loves. The Jessie Cade I knew would do that. What do you want, Wade? To offer you a deal. You come in peaceful, and I guarantee you a fair trial. Not in Arizona where feelings run high, but in Colorado, Judge McKenna's bench. You remember him? Fair man. Jessie laughed harshly. A fair trial for killing the men who murdered my wife? We both know how that ends. Maybe, maybe not. Times are changing. Folks understand a man seeking justice for his family. Garrison's voice dropped. It's better than dying on this hillside. Jessie, better for both of you. And Clara, the girl's a different matter. Hutchins has legal papers on her, claims she's indentured. Garrison looked at Clara with those kind eyes. But papers can be challenged. A good lawyer might find irregularities, especially if certain parties were motivated to drop charges. Clara felt hope flutter in her chest, but Jessie was shaking his head. You're asking me to trust a system that failed me before. I'm asking you to trust me. Garrison took another step. Jessie, I've spent 3 years chasing you. You know why? Because I failed you. I should have helped you get justice for Mary. Instead, I hid behind the law. This is my chance to make it right. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Clara found herself believing him, but she could feel Jessie's tension, his unwillingness to surrender their freedom to promises. I need time to think, Jessie said. You've got until full dark. After that, Daniels and Colton will force the issue, and I won't be able to stop them. Garrison mounted his horse. Think hard, old friend. This is the only chance you'll get. He rode back up the slope, leaving them alone with an impossible choice. Clara could see the conflict in Jessie's face, the war between survival instinct and exhaustion. He means it, she said softly. Maybe, but meaning it and delivering are two different things. Jessie stared at the darkening sky. I can't go back to a cage. Clara, I'd rather die here, free. And me, what happens to me when you're dead? He flinched at her words. That's the only reason I'm considering it. They sat in silence as darkness gathered. Above them, they could see fires being lit, the posse settling in for a siege. Time was running out. Jessie, Clara said finally. What if this is the way? Not the ending we imagined, but maybe the only one that doesn't end in blood. You'd go back to Hutchins. I'd fight him in court, with you alive to support me. I'd have a chance. Without you. She didn't finish. Jessie pulled her close, and she could feel him trembling, not with fear, but with the effort of decision. I swore I'd never surrender, swore it on Mary's grave. Mary's gone, Clara said gently. But I'm here, and I'm asking you to live. For me, for us, for that valley in Mexico we might still see someday. A sound made them both look up. Someone was coming down the slope, not Garrison this time, but Lillian, picking her way carefully in the gathering dark. "That's close enough," Jessie warned. "Rifle raising." Lillian stopped, hands spread. "I'm not armed. Just wanted to talk to the woman who tamed Jesse Cade." "State your piece and go," Clara said coldly. "You love him." It wasn't a question. "I can see it. The way you look at him, the way you're ready to die beside him. I had that once. Or thought I did." "What's your point?" "My point is that love isn't always enough. The world's too hard, too cruel. It breaks things, even beautiful things, especially beautiful things." Lillian's voice carried old pain. "But maybe if you're smarter than I was, stronger than I was, you'll beat the odds." She reached into her coat, and both Jessie and Clara tensed, but she pulled out only a leather pouch, which she tossed to land near them. "What's this?" Jessie asked. "A chance. There's enough gold there to bribe the right people, grease the right wheels, make sure Clara's case gets heard by a sympathetic judge." Lillian smiled sadly. "Consider it a wedding gift." "Why?" Clara had to ask. "Because I owe Jessie that much. Because I led Daniels to San Rafael. Because—" she shrugged. "Because maybe if you two make it, it means there's still hope for the rest of us." She turned and walked back up the slope without another word, leaving them staring at the pouch of gold. "Well," Jessie said after a moment, "that was unexpected. Despite everything." Clara found herself laughing, a slightly hysterical sound that echoed off the rocks. Here they were, trapped between death and capture, and their salvation might come from Jessie's former lover. "The world's gone mad," she said. "Been that way for a while." Jessie hefted the pouch, judging its weight. "This changes things. With money for lawyers, we might have a chance." Full dark was approaching. Soon, Garrison's deadline would pass, and decision would be forced on them. Clara could see Jessie wrestling with years of habit, the instinct to fight to the last bullet warring with newfound hope. "All right," he said finally, and she could hear what the words cost him. "We'll try it your way." Clara kissed him, tasting desperation and determination. Together, together. Jessie stood slowly, raising his voice to Carrie. "Wade Garrison! I hear you! Jessie! We're coming out! Nobody shoots! You have my word!" They gathered their few belongings, Jessie leaning on Clara as much for emotional support as physical. As they climbed the slope, Clara kept her hand near her gun, ready for betrayal. But Garrison was as good as his word. He met them personally. Keeping Daniels and Colton's men back, the bounty hunters looked furious at being cheated of their kill, but the federal badge carried weight. "You made the right choice," Garrison said quietly. "We'll see," Jessie replied, but he allowed himself to be disarmed without resistance. As they prepared to ride out, Clara found herself facing Frank Colton. The outlaw's eyes burned with hatred. "This ain't over," he snarled. "Law or no law, you killed my brothers. There'll be a reckoning." "Get in line," Clara said coolly, and had the satisfaction of seeing surprise on his face. They rode through the night, Garrison setting a pace that discouraged any thought of revenge from the disappointed hunters. Clara rode beside Jessie, their hands occasionally touching, drawing strength from each other. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and sharp with the smell of sage and rain. Stars emerged one by one, until the sky was ablaze with light. It wasn't the ending they'd imagined, not the Mexican Valley with its promise of peace, but it wasn't an ending at all. Just another turn in the trail, another challenge to face. "No regrets?" Garrison asked, riding up beside them. Jessie looked at Clara, seeing his answer in her steady gaze. No regrets. They rode on toward an uncertain future, but they rode together. And sometimes, Clara thought, that was victory enough. The girl who'd climbed through a saloon window was gone, replaced by a woman who'd found her strength in the crucible of the desert. Whatever came next, trials, lawyers, the whole weight of civilization's judgment, she'd face it with the same courage she'd found on the outlaw trail. Beside her, Jesse rode tall despite his shackles, and Clara knew that no chains could truly hold either of them. They were free in all the ways that mattered, and that freedom would sustain them through whatever trials lay ahead. The crimson dawn was coming, one way or another. The abandoned homestead crouched against the Mexican border like a wounded animal, its adobe walls crumbling but still standing against the desert wind. They'd been running for 2 days since the confrontation at the slope. Garrison's promise of safe passage shattered by Frank Colton's midnight ambush that left 2 marshals dead and their prisoner escaped in the chaos. Now Jesse lay on a makeshift bed of old blankets, fever raging through his body again. The wound had reopened during their flight, and infection had set in with a vengeance. Clara knelt beside him, using the last of their water to cool his burning skin. Should have known, Jesse muttered through cracked lips. Colton was never going to let it go. Save your strength, Clara said, though fear clawed at her insides. Without medicine, without clean water, without help, Jesse would die. The knowledge sat in her stomach like lead. Through the broken window, she could see dust clouds on the horizon, riders, still distant but coming steadily. Whether it was Colton seeking revenge, Daniels wanting his bounty, or Garrison trying to recapture them, it didn't matter. They were trapped. Clara! Jesse's voice was stronger suddenly, the false clarity that sometimes came with high fever. You need to go. Take the gold Lillian gave us. Take my horse. You can make the border by nightfall. We've had this conversation. She gripped his hand tightly. I'm not leaving you. Damn it, woman! He tried to sit up, fell back gasping. I'm dying! Can't you see that? No sense in both of us. Then we die together. Clara checked her Colt for the 100th time. 5 bullets left. She'd save the last 2 for them if it came to that. Better than what Colton would do if he took them alive. Jesse's eyes, bright with fever, fixed on her face. Stubborn, he whispered. Always were too stubborn. Learned from the best. The riders were closer now, maybe an hour away. Clara could make out individual forms, count their numbers, 8 men, riding in formation. Her heart sank. Too many to fight, nowhere to run. She wet Jesse's lips with the last drops from their canteen, then positioned herself at the window with his rifle. If this was the end, she'd make it count. The girl from the silver dollar was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd learned the desert's harsh lessons well. Clara, Jesse's voice was fading. Need to tell you. In case. Tell me after. She said firmly. When we're safe in Mexico. But even as she spoke, she knew it for a lie. There would be no Mexico, no valley with good water, no peace for the weary. Just this last stand in a crumbling house. 2 against the world. The riders had stopped just out of rifle range. Clara could see them conferring, probably planning their approach. She recognized Frank Colton's bulk, saw the glint of sun on badges. They'd come in force this time. Then something strange happened. A lone rider separated from the group, riding not toward the house but parallel to it, heading for a cluster of rocks to the east. Clara tracked the movement, confused. Were they trying to flank already? A shot rang out, but not aimed at the house. The lone rider tumbled from his horse, and suddenly the remaining group was in chaos. Men diving for cover as more shots came from the rocks. What the hell? Clara breathed. The firefight intensified, the original pursuers now pinned down by unseen attackers. Clara could hear shouting, curses, the screams of wounded men. In minutes, it was over. 3 riders fled back the way they'd come, leaving bodies scattered on the desert floor. Silence fell, broken only by Jesse's labored breathing. Clara kept her rifle trained on the rocks, waiting for the new threat to show itself. 3 figures emerged, hands raised to show peaceful intent. The leader was a tall black man in cavalry pants and a worn jacket, moving with military precision. Behind him came a Mexican woman and a young white man who couldn't have been more than 18. Hold your fire, miss, the black man called. We're friends, sent by Joseph from the trading post. Clara didn't lower the rifle. Prove it. The man reached slowly into his jacket, pulled out something that caught the light. Joseph's silver medallion. The one he wore on a chain. Clara had seen it when they'd stopped for supplies. Joseph heard about your troubles. The man continued, stopping well within rifle range to show trust. Sent us to help. Name's Ezekiel Washington. These are my companions, Maria Sandoval and Tommy McBride. Why would Joseph help us? Because Jesse Cade saved his nephew from hanging 2 years back. Joseph pays his debts. Ezekiel's eyes found the bodies of their pursuers. Looks like we arrived just in time. Clara finally lowered the rifle, exhaustion hitting her like a physical blow. Jesse's dying, fever, infection, without medicine. Maria stepped forward. I am a healer. Let me see him. It was a risk, but Clara had no choice. She led them inside, watching as Maria immediately went to work, her hands gentle but efficient as she examined Jesse. The infection is bad, but not beyond hope. Maria announced, I have medicines, but he needs rest, clean water, proper care. He cannot travel like this. Colton will be back, Tommy said from the doorway where he kept watch. With more men, we bloodied his nose, but he won't give up. Ezekiel studied the situation with a tactical eye. This place is defensible. Good sight lines, solid walls. We could hold here for a time. Or we could run, Clara said. Get Jesse somewhere safe. Moving him now would kill him faster than Colton's bullets. Maria said firmly, he needs at least 2 days before he can travel. 2 days. It might as well have been 2 years. Clara looked at these strangers who'd risked their lives for them and made a decision. Then we make our stand here. They worked through the afternoon, fortifying their position. Tommy and Ezekiel dragged the bodies away, collected weapons and ammunition from the dead. Maria tended Jesse with herbs and poultices that filled the air with strange scents. Clara found herself organizing their defense, a role that would have seemed impossible weeks ago. You've got a good eye for this, Ezekiel commented as they positioned supplies. Military training? Hard living? Clara replied. Jesse taught me to see terrain like cover and concealment, not just landscape. He taught you well. As the sun began to sink, Tommy spotted new dust clouds. They're coming back, lots of them. Clara counted at least 15 riders, maybe 20. Her heart sank. They had more guns now, more ammunition, but the numbers were still impossible. Why are you doing this? She asked Ezekiel. You could leave. This isn't your fight. The former soldier smiled grimly. Every fight against men like Colton is my fight. Besides, Miss Clara, where would we go? People like us, a black cavalryman, a Mexican healer, an Irish orphan. We're all outlaws in our own way. The riders stopped well out of range as darkness fell. They could see fires being lit. Colton was settling in for a siege. Clara organized watches, checked their ammunition, tried not to think about how this would end. Jesse woke briefly as Maria changed his bandages. His eyes were clearer, the fever breaking thanks to her medicines. Clara, his voice was weak but aware. What's happening? She told him quickly about their unexpected allies, the fortified position, the siege beginning outside. Jesse listened, then managed a slight smile. Guardian angel with a 6-gun, he murmured. Now you've got your own gang. Rest. She told him, save your strength. For what? The hanging? For Mexico, she said firmly. For that valley. For the life we're going to have. Jesse squeezed her hand weakly. Love your optimism, darling. Almost makes me believe it. The night passed quietly. Their enemies content to wait. Clara dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every sound. Near dawn, Maria touched her shoulder. He's asking for you. Clara found Jesse propped up slightly, his color better but still far from healthy. Need to talk, he said, in case I don't get another chance. You will. Listen. His gray eyes held hers. I've written it out, best I could with this hand. It's all there, testimony about the Colton gang, what they did to Mary, why I killed them. Ezekiel witnessed it. It's legal. If something happens to me, it might help your case. Nothing's going to happen. Clara, his voice was gentle but firm. We both know how this likely ends. But you You might make it. Should make it. Promise me you'll try. Only if you promise the same." He smiled, that rare expression that transformed his weathered face. "You know something? These past weeks with you, they've been worth the years of running. I'd do it all again just for this time. Don't talk like you're saying goodbye. Not goodbye. Just thank you for reminding me I still had a heart to give." Clara kissed him, tasting medicine and dust and the salt of her own tears. "Save the speeches for our wedding. Jesse Cade, I intend to make an honest man of you yet." A shout from outside broke the moment. Tommy at the window. Voice tight. "They're moving! All of them!" Clara grabbed her rifle, rushing to the window. In the gray pre-dawn light, she could see Colton's men spreading out, preparing for an all-out assault. This was it. "Positions!" Ezekiel commanded. "All soldier now. Tommy, west wall. Maria, keep low. Be ready with medical supplies. Miss Clara, you're with me at the front." Clara took her place, checking her ammunition one last time. The Colt at her hip, Jesse's rifle in her hands, and a strange calm settling over her. Whatever happened next, she'd face it standing. "Clara!" It was Colton himself, his voice carrying across the desert. "Last chance. Send out Cade, and you and your new friends can ride away." "Go to hell, Frank," she shouted back. "Your choice." The attack came with the sunrise, men rushing from multiple directions. The defenders fired steadily, picking their targets. Clara found herself in a strange state of clarity, each shot deliberate, each movement purposeful. This was what Jesse had trained her for, consciously or not. Ezekiel fought with military precision, every bullet finding its mark. Tommy, despite his youth, held the west wall with desperate courage. Even Maria, when an attacker breached their defenses, proved deadly with a hidden knife. But there were too many. For every man they dropped, two more seemed to take his place. Their ammunition ran low, then lower. Clara found herself down to her last rifle rounds. The Colt her only backup. "Fall back to the inner room," Ezekiel ordered. They retreated, carrying Jesse despite his weak protests. The attackers pressed forward, sensing victory. Clara could hear Colton shouting orders, promising rewards for whoever took Jesse alive. Then, impossibly, the attack faltered. New gunfire erupted from outside, catching Colton's men in a crossfire. Clara heard military commands, the thunder of many horses. "What's happening?" Tommy gasped. Through a crack in the wall, Clara saw blue uniforms, cavalry, a full troop sweeping down on Colton's outlaws like an avenging wave. In minutes, the siege became a rout. "The army?" Ezekiel sounded as stunned as Clara felt. "What are they doing here?" The answer came as the gunfire died, and a familiar voice called out, "Jesse, Clara, it's Wade Garrison. It's safe." Clara emerged cautiously to find Garrison dismounting, a cavalry captain beside him. The federal marshal looked exhausted, but relieved. "Thank God we made it in time," he said. "When I heard Colton had found you—" "How?" was all Clara could manage. "Joseph sent word about your situation. I was already heading this way with Captain Morrison's troop. Colton's raids have gotten too bold, attacking across the border. Military matter now." Clara looked around at the battlefield. Colton's men dead or captured, the siege broken. They'd survived. Impossibly, against all odds, they'd survived. "Is he—" Garrison nodded toward the house. "Alive? Sick, but alive." Clara straightened, finding strength she didn't know she had left. "And he stays that way. We had a deal, Marshal." "We did," Garrison agreed. "And I mean to honor it. Jesse will get his fair trial, and you'll get your day in court about those papers of Hutchins. With a good lawyer," Clara said firmly. "Paid for in gold." Garrison smiled slightly. "I suspect that can be arranged, especially given the testimony Captain Morrison just heard about Colton's crimes. Self-defense makes a powerful argument." As the soldiers secured the scene and Maria tended the wounded, Clara returned to Jesse's side. His eyes were open, aware, filled with wonder. "We made it?" he asked. "We made it," she confirmed. "The hard way, as usual. Is there any other way for us? Clara laughed, surprising herself with the sound. Probably not. But Jesse? Next time we plan a trip to Mexico, let's take the train. His weak laughter joined hers. And in that moment, despite everything, the violence, the uncertain future, the long road still ahead, Clara felt hope. Real hope. Not just desperate wishing. They'd survived the crucible. Whatever came next, trials, lawyers, the weight of civilization's judgment, they'd face it together. The outlaw and the saloon girl who'd found strength in each other and forged something unbreakable in the desert's harsh embrace. Outside, dawn was breaking properly now, painting the desert in shades of gold and red, a crimson dawn, like all the others, but this one carrying the promise of a future they'd paid for in blood and courage and love. Clara held Jesse's hand and watched the sunrise. No longer running, no longer afraid. They'd earned this moment of peace, however brief. And somehow, that was enough. The cavalry camp at dawn was a world away from the violence of the previous day. Clara stood at the edge of the perimeter, watching the sun paint the desert in familiar shades of crimson and gold. Behind her, Jesse slept in the medical tent, his fever finally broken, his breathing steady for the first time in days. Wade Garrison approached with 2 cups of coffee, offering one to Clara. "Thought you could use this." She accepted gratefully, the bitter warmth a comfort after the long night. "What happens now?" "Captain Morrison's men will escort us to Fort Grant. Jesse will recover there, then we'll head to Colorado for the trial." Garrison studied her over his cup. "You know it won't be easy. Even with Colton dead and testimonies in Jesse's favor, the law is complicated. But there's hope. There's hope. Judge McKenna is a fair man. And this," he gestured to the battlefield being cleaned by soldiers, "changes things. Jesse helped stop a man who was terrorizing the territory. That counts for something." Clara nodded, her fingers unconsciously touching the Colt still at her hip. "And my situation with Hutchins. I've already sent word to a lawyer in Denver, Margaret Thornfield. She specializes in cases like yours. Those indenture papers won't hold up to scrutiny, especially with Jesse's testimony about the conditions at the Silver Dollar." The name of the saloon sent a shiver through Clara. It seemed a lifetime ago that she'd climbed through that window, following a dangerous stranger into the night. Now she could barely recognize the frightened girl she'd been. "Clara!" Maria Sandoval emerged from the medical tent. "He's asking for you." Jesse was propped up on a cot, his color better though still pale. His gray eyes found hers immediately, warming with an emotion that made her heart skip. "There's my guardian angel," he said softly. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been dragged behind a horse through a cactus patch." He managed a slight smile. "But alive. Thanks to you. Thanks to all of us." Clara sat beside him, taking his hand. "Ezekiel, Maria, Tommy, we couldn't have done it without them." "Where are they?" "Garrison offered them safe passage wherever they want to go. Ezekiel's thinking of heading to California. Maria wants to return to her village. Tommy," she smiled, "Tommy wants to join the army. Says if they'll take an Irish orphan, he'll serve with pride." Jessie squeezed her hand. "And us? What do we want? First, we get you healthy, then we face the trial. After that." Clara met his eyes steadily. "That valley in Mexico is still waiting." "You still believe we'll see it?" "I do. Call it faith, call it stubbornness. But I believe we've earned our chance at peace." The journey to Fort Grant took 3 days, Jesse growing stronger with each mile. Clara rode beside his wagon, ever watchful despite the military protection. Old habits died hard, and she'd learned to never fully drop her guard. At the fort, they were given quarters, separate rooms. Propriety maintained even in these circumstances. But Clara spent her days at Jesse's side as he recovered, talking about everything and nothing, planning for a future that finally seemed possible. One evening, as she sat reading to him from a book of poetry the fort commander's wife had lent her, Jesse interrupted. "Marry me." Clara looked up. "Startled?" "What?" "Marry me. Here, now, before the trial. Whatever happens, I want you to be my wife. Jesse, she set the book aside, searching his face. Is this because you think you might hang? Because if it is, it's because I love you, he said simply. Because you stayed when anyone else would have run. Because you became my strength when I had none left. Because I can't imagine facing tomorrow without you beside me. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. You know I can't resist when you get poetic. Is that a yes? That's a yes. The ceremony was simple. Held in the fort's chapel with Garrison as witness and Captain Morrison officiating. Clara wore a borrowed dress from the commander's wife. Jesse stood straight despite his healing wounds. And when they kissed, she tasted promise and hope and home. 2 weeks later, they stood in a Colorado courthouse. Jesse in chains but head held high. The trial was everything Garrison had warned, complicated, emotional, fraught with legal technicalities. But Margaret Thornfield proved to be a formidable advocate, and the testimony of multiple witnesses painted a picture of justified revenge against murdering outlaws. When the verdict came, guilty of manslaughter, not murder, sentence commuted to time served in consideration of services to the territory. Clara felt her knees nearly buckle with relief. Jesse was free, truly, legally free. Her own case was simpler. Thornfield tore apart Hutchins's papers with surgical precision, revealing forgeries, illegalities, and coercion. Within an hour, Clara Whitfield Cade was declared a free woman, no man's property but her own. They walked out of the courthouse into a crisp Colorado morning, breathing free air for the first time in what felt like forever. Now what? Jesse asked, his arm around her waist. Now? Clara smiled up at him. Now we live, really live. That valley's still waiting. 6 months later, in a small Mexican village near the border, Clara stood in the doorway of their adobe house, watching Jesse work with a young horse in the corral. His movements were easy, confident, a man at peace with his place in the world. Their valley was everything he'd promised. Good water, fertile soil, mountains that touched the sky. They raised horses, grew vegetables, lived quietly among people who didn't care about their past, only their present. Sometimes Clara would wake in the night, reaching for her gun, remembering the violence of their flight, but Jesse would be there, solid and warm, whispering that it was over. They were safe, they were home. She thought of the girl in the silver dollar, dying slowly behind a practiced smile. That girl could never have imagined this life, the freedom, the love, the simple joy of choosing her own path. The sun was setting, painting the sky in those eternal shades of red and gold. Jesse finished with the horse and walked toward her, still moving with that fluid grace that had first caught her attention in a dusty saloon. Regrets? He asked, pulling her close. Never, Clara said, and meant it. They stood together in the doorway of their home, watching the crimson dawn of another day in their hard-won paradise. The outlaw and the saloon girl who'd found salvation in each other, who'd paid for their freedom in blood and courage, who'd learned that sometimes the only way out is through somewhere out there. Other souls were trapped in their own cages, dreaming of escape. Clara hoped they'd find their courage, their strength, their Jesse Cade to show them that freedom was possible, even if the path was dangerous. Don't look back, Jesse murmured, echoing the words that had started their journey. Only forward. Clara agreed, turning in his arms to kiss him as the last light faded from the sky. They'd made it to Mexico, to their valley, to their life together. The crimson dawn had led them home at last. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. Where are you enjoying this tale from? Please comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Clara and Jesse's journey. Your support means everything to us.